As Congress looks at ways to reform the country's financial infrastructure, we need to ask whether bank supervision is central to central banking. It is worth examining whether the Federal Reserve should conduct monetary policy at the same time it regulates and supervises banks, or whether it should concentrate exclusively on its macroeconomic responsibilities. It's no exaggeration to say that the health of our financial system depends on getting this answer right. Frankly, the Fed's performance as a holding company supervisor has been inadequate. In spite of its oversight, many of the large, complex banking organizations excessively leveraged and engaged in off-balance sheet transactions that helped precipitate the financial crisis. Just this past week, the report of Lehman Brothers' court-appointed bankruptcy examiner was made public. The report details how Lehman Brothers used accounting gimmicks to hide its debt and mask its insolvency. According to the New York Times, all this happened while a team of officials from the Securities Exchange Commission and Federal Reserve Bank of New York were resident examiners in the headquarters of Lehman Brothers. As many as a dozen government officials were provided desks, phones, computers, and access to all of Lehman's books and records. Despite this intense on-site presence, the New York Fed and the SEC stood idle while the bank engaged in the balance sheet manipulations detailed in the report. This raises serious questions regarding the capability of the Fed to conduct bank supervision. Yet even if supervision of its regulated institutions improves, it's not clear that oversight really informs monetary policy. If supervision does not make monetary policy decisions better, then the two do not need to be coupled. Vince Reinhardt, a former director of the Fed's Division of Monetary Affairs and now a resident scholar at the American Enterprise Institution, said that collecting diverse responsibilities in one institution is like asking a plumber to check the wiring in your basement. It seems that when the Fed is responsible for monetary policy and bank supervision, its performance in both suffers. Macroeconomic issues cloud supervisory judgments, therefore imperiling safety and soundness. There are inherent conflicts of interest where the Fed may be tempted to conduct monetary policy in such a way that hides its mistakes by protecting the struggling banks it supervises. An additional problem arises when the supervision of large banks is separated from small institutions. Under Senator Dodd's proposal, the Fed would supervise 40 or 50 large banks, and the other 750,000 or so banks, or 7,500 or so banks would be under the regulatory purview of other federal and state banking agencies. If this were to happen, the Fed's focus on the mega banks will inevitably disadvantage the regional and community banks. And I think on this, Chairman Bernanke, you and I are in agreement that there ought to be one regulator looking at all the institutions. H.R. 3311, the House Republican Regulatory Reform Plan, would correct these problems. It would refocus the Fed on its monetary policy mandate by relieving it of its regulatory and supervisory responsibilities and reassign them to other agencies. By contrast, the regulatory reform legislation passed by the House in December represented the largest expansion of the Fed's regulatory role since its creation almost 100 years ago. Senator Dodd has strengthened the Fed even more. His regulatory reform bill empowers the Fed to regulate systemically significant financial institutions and to enforce strict standards for institutions as they grow larger and more complex, adopts the Volcker rule to restrict proprietary trading and investment by banks, and creates a new Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to be housed and funded by the Fed. In my view, the Democrats are asking the Fed to do too much. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing. I look forward to the testimony.